time to check in with CoinDesk Global Policy and Regulation Managing Editor Nick Day, who's also the editor of CoinDesk's The State of Crypto newsletter. Good morning, Nick. So there's a lot of anticipation on whether or not we're going to see a Bitcoin ETF happening this summer. What's the lowdown?
Yeah, good morning. So let me say up front, this is pure speculation from me. Belief that a spot Bitcoin ETF might be approved for the first time in the US this summer was sort of renewed last week after the SEC approved a Bitcoin futures ETF filed by Ethereum Bitcoin issuer or ETF issuer. We talked a little bit about that last week. Basically, the law that this particular filing was applied under is the one that primarily oversees spot Bitcoin ETF applications. All other Bitcoin futures ETFs so far have been filed under a different law, the 40 Act, the Investment Company Act. And those have been, very specific. SEC Chair Gary Gensler has said that he's comfortable with that particular law because of the investor protections, held within. Whereas he's not, comfortable with a spot Bitcoin ETF, partly because of the lack of protections enshrined in the law, and partly because the structure of the spot ETF itself means it would rely on Bitcoin trading on spot market exchanges that Gensler does not trust, to sort of paraphrase everything he said in the last year and a half. Now, speculation has, it's ramped up, but I don't think an ETF is going to happen. I genuinely don't. I think, we're going to see more rejections because the SEC has like a huge list of concerns that they've expressed, and almost none of them have been addressed. So I don't think that you're going to see it, even though, people trying to file for an ETF say like, okay, if a futures ETF is launched, why not a spot ETF? It's based on the price of Bitcoin, right? So yeah, I think it's we're going to see a lot more speculation and a lot more comments about this.
But does everybody who thinks that this is going to happen miss a big point in all of this, which is that the reason, or one of the reasons that Gensler doesn't want to get a spot ETF is he not only doesn't want to get his hands dirty in dealing with regulating some of these unregulatable exchanges offshore, or trying to regulate them when he can't, but also just the fact that it would sort of give a stamp of approval to something that he doesn't approve of, if you will. Is that getting through to people? Like, are they just kind of like in a fantasy world where they think that, well, I dream that we'll have a Bitcoin ETF, it must come true. I mean, like, how much of what they think is reality versus just pure hocus pocus?
I mean, I do think there might be a bit of a disconnect in that a lot of the conversation has focused on, what the SEC should do and what it could do. I have not seen as much discussion of what the SEC has actually said, right? At this point, every rejection, every spot Bitcoin ETF rejection was basically boilerplate language. The SEC says pretty much every time it has concerns about market manipulation, it has concerns about certain players in the market, it has concerns about the exchanges being unregulated at the federal level. And in the approval for last week's filing, the SEC even said, like, yeah, we've acknowledged that we have rejected spot Bitcoin ETFs because of those reasons that we said, and the only reason we're approving this futures one is because we believe that the CME market that the Bitcoin ETFs are based on, the Bitcoin futures market, is tightly regulated because CME has a significant surveillance sharing agreement. It has a market of significant size, and it is able to kind of control this market. It's regulated by the CFTC. So the SEC has spelled out in detail not only what its concerns are, but what it took to bypass them or to address them. And I have seen very little discussion, at least on online. I'm sure maybe within the legal cloakrooms of the firms trying to file a spot Bitcoin ETF, maybe they're talking about this, but I have not seen any discussion of this out in the public.
Yeah. But the reasoning is strange. I mean, they want to prevent market manipulation, but they're accepting Bitcoin futures, but not a spot Bitcoin ETF. I don't understand how that makes a huge difference. But we'll wrap it up there.
It's the idea that it's just the idea that the CME futures market, CME can control what happens. So they know exactly where the data is coming from. They know exactly where the pricing data is coming from, and they can address any anomalies. Which you can't do if you're basing it on prices on crypto exchanges.